as I started planning, I said, oh, it's January 1st. It's the first Sunday of the year. I'm not going to go too crazy. Have a simple topic, something easy. And then it dawned on me. I was like, the Packers play at 7:30. The Lions play at 7:30. And then this morning, Mike said that the Steelers game doesn't really matter because they're already in the playoffs. And I realized I blew an opportunity. I could have gone for hours, and nobody would have cared because there's no football games. There's no CEF. We could have been in here for an hour and a half doing his message. Fortunately, I went with the short plan, so we won't have to do that. As I started thinking about today and what to share, a few things came to mind. And it is so short that I actually just kind of put it on my tablet. I didn't even print it out because it was relatively short. And what I started thinking about was how we sometimes struggle with what our ministry might be, what our mission from God might be, and what God might have us do. And I know that can be a real struggle. I've often said I don't hear God's voice very well sometimes. A lot of times he's got to get a bat out and hit me upside the head so that I listen to what he's got to say. So it's not always easy to understand what God would be saying, this is what I want you to go do. Now, for some, it's real easy. They hear, I'm supposed to go to Africa and be a missionary. I'm supposed to go to the south of the United States and serve people during a flood. I'm going to go on this mission trip, or I'm going to have this ministry. Some people are called to the pulpit, and they know what they're called to do. But for the rest of us, it's not always that easy. But as I started thinking about that and thinking about how we serve God's mission, it sort of came up. It was like, it's not always some big, planned out, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to have a 10-year plan to meet this mission that God has for me. I started to look at what Jesus did in the Bible, and if you think about it, in a 3-year ministry, so much of what we read about from Jesus, stuff that happened while he was walking down the street, right? It wasn't, I'm going to go and serve this group, or I'm going to go and set up a building and have this ministry. That's not what it was all about. If you read through the Bible, you start to see examples where Jesus provided ministry, things happened. Now, last week, I talked a little bit about the wedding feast at Cana, and last week the approach was about how Jesus was obedient to what his mother said. It was a little different topic, but the wedding feast at Cana is a good example of exactly what I'm talking about. Jesus didn't set up some big ministry to provide help to people. A situation came up, he saw a need, and with his mother's help, he met that need. He said, yeah, here's a way that I can help someone. And there are a couple other examples that I'm going to look at from Luke and John. And one of them is in Luke chapter 8. So I'm going to start at verse 40 because it ties two things together. In Luke chapter 8, verse 40, we read, when Jesus returned to the other side of the lake, the people welcomed him because they had all been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus arrived. He was an official in the local synagogue. He threw himself down at Jesus' feet and begged him to go to his home because his only daughter, who was 12 years old, was dying. Okay, so set the situation up. Jesus is out among the people preaching, and someone comes up to him and says, Jesus, you've got to come and help me right now. My daughter is dead. And what did Jesus do? He stood up, and he said, okay, let's go. Right? As Jesus went along, the people were crowding him from every side. Among them was a woman who had suffered from severe bleeding for 12 years. She had spent all she had on doctors, but no one had been able to cure her. She came up in the crowd behind Jesus and touched the edge of his cloak, and her bleeding stopped at once. Jesus asked, who touched me? Everyone denied it, and Peter said, Master, the people are all around you and crowding in on you. But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I knew it when power went out of me." The woman saw that she had been found out, so she came trembling and threw herself at Jesus' feet. There, in front of everybody, she told him why she had touched him and how she had been healed at once. Jesus said to her, "My daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." So, Jesus, who's already been called away from what he was doing to go help someone and was going that way, comes up on a situation where someone needs help and he doesn't even at the moment know it, right? She reaches out to him. She reaches out for the help that Jesus can provide to her. A couple of things there. One, she had faith that doing that would help, right? Didn't go up to touch him because, well, maybe it'll work. She'd been to plenty of people who couldn't help her. She'd spent all kinds of money on what we might call charlatans who said, yes, no, I can solve that problem, and they couldn't. So she went to Jesus to get the help, and she knew her faith was that if she could just touch the robe of Jesus, she would be healed. So here's Jesus, right? Not looking for a ministry, not looking for someone to help, but the opportunity presents itself. And he's able to help someone and demonstrate God's power in their lives and how the opportunity that presents itself can be taken and used as a teaching moment. Now, if we look at John, there's another such opportunity in John chapter 4. And this is one that I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's actually the entire chapter of the book. But as I relay it, I think you'll recall it. John chapter 4 is about the Samaritan woman who approaches Jesus at the well. And she comes up and she's looking to get water, and Jesus asks her, "Hey, would you get me a drink of water?" And that catches her off guard because she is a Samaritan. And from other stories, we know that Samaritans and Jews didn't necessarily get along the best. But Jesus sees an opportunity. He's just sitting there as they travel from town to town, and a woman walking out becomes an opportunity not only to teach about God's power and about why he's there, but it becomes an opportunity to change her life. Because as we go through the story, we know that she has not led the life that we would look at and say, well, she's the righteous one. She's the one who is the shining example of what we should be. We know that she has had challenges in her life. We know that she has done things that maybe would be frowned upon by the people in her town. Jesus does that, but says, hey, I'm here to offer a way out. I'm going to provide the means for you to be healed for all those things. Again, he wasn't looking for an opportunity. It presented itself. And so much in our lives is exactly that. Opportunities show up where we can provide assistance or we can reach out and provide outreach to others. And that's what we have to be on the lookout for. Now, Jesus had a ministry. We know that. Jesus had places he was going, people he was talking to. He had his disciples. He had his close-in ministry. But everything that he did, everywhere that he went, he would keep his eyes open and he would see those opportunities to teach and to heal and to provide love and to reach out to others and say, look, this is what you could be, what I have to offer, okay? Now, when you think about examples in our lives, there's one I want to talk about today. I'm sort of glad Henry's not here because Henry would sit and turn red and get all embarrassed. Because on Friday, we learned that Esther and Augie Bratz's water heater had ruptured. The basement was flooding with water, and that is something that is beyond the skill of a great many of us to fix. One phone call to Henry, and Henry showed up. Henry looked at the situation. Henry said, oh, this is what we have to do to fix it. Henry immediately went and got all of his tools. He got the components he would needed, sent Kim to the hardware store to start looking at water heaters. bought the water heater, got it over to Esther and Augie's, and within a couple of hours of the water heater being found to have ruptured, Henry had replaced it, and they were all good. This was more important than just the water heater getting fixed, but because of the way that their system was set up, the only way we could secure the water was to actually turn the house off, to shut the water main. So from the time that it was identified that there was a problem until Henry got it fixed, they would have been without water in the rest of the house. And obviously, Esther and Augie are there full time. They have their kids around and grandkids. So it was important that this get fixed. Okay? Henry didn't go, well, yeah, I'm busy. He didn't go, well, have him call someone who does this, a contractor. No, Henry dropped what he was doing, came over to their house, and fixed the problem. Esther and Augie, you have to know it, and those of you who know Esther and Augie, they're super appreciative of what was done that day, right? Henry didn't have to do that, but he saw the opportunity to provide assistance, and as Henry often does, he said, yeah, I'll go do that. It's no big, as I told the kids, there wasn't some huge biblical message. We weren't sitting around going, okay, as the water heater is getting fixed, let's have a Sunday school lesson. It was simply demonstrating God's love through the church as Henry did that. And Esther and Augie, you have to believe they understand that and they know that. Those are the sort of opportunities that pop up in our lives. Now, we're not all experts at fixing water heaters. I'll be the first to tell you, I wouldn't have been able to fix that for anything, right? But Henry has that expertise. Henry has the gift that, of mechanical ability. We don't all have that. But we've all got those abilities, right? How many of us in the past 12 months have received a card for a birthday, from someone in the church? Pretty sure most of us have to raise our hands, because if the date of our birth is known, we get a card from someone in the church. So usually more than one, but usually you get at least one. That's a wonderful opportunity for someone to say, hey, here's a mission. Doesn't take, no advanced degree needed, no super skill needed. But you know what? There is a gift there, because I am terrible. If you expect to get a birthday card from me, please don't hold your breath while you do it, because that's not my skill set. I'm no good at that. Something my mom would tell me I need to work on, but it's just not something that I do. But there are people who do that. If you need a ride, if there are people who will help out and get that done, there are always these opportunities. But the one thing we need to do is think about, how do we take that outside and apply it beyond the walls of the church, right? And there's a few things that I would say that we can do that would help us in not just reaching into the church, but outside of the church. And the very first thing is to stay alert, right? We have to pay attention. These opportunities show up, and often we're so blinded by the things that we have going on in our lives that we miss them, okay? There are times when things just happen, and it's an opportunity for us to show what our Christian faith is and to reach out and help someone. We also have to stay active, okay? Just because you see something, it doesn't mean that it's an opportunity's been met, because we have to stay active and we have to stay busy doing those things that God would have us do, okay? And that means not just here, all right? It's really easy to be active inside the church. We come to church, we hear a message, we get excited, we think, yeah, that's awesome. We have to think about how we live our lives like Jesus and take that outside the walls of the church. How do we see things outside where we have the opportunity to serve the ministries that God would have us fulfill? Sometimes it does mean being active and hearing and seeing a problem that's 1,000 miles away and requires us to travel and to get to it. But other times it doesn't. There are opportunities here. We look at Community Clothes Closet. We look at, the police. They carry around stuffed animals for little kids who are traumatized. That's a ministry that people meet, right? Nobody said, oh, that's what I'm going to set out to do. It just became that. They saw a need and they rose up to meet it. They were active outside the walls of the church. And most importantly, you have to stay ready and willing to respond. Okay? When Henry got a phone call saying, hey, the Bratz's water heater is ruptured and we need to repair it, got busy. He was willing to respond to the need. If we see a need and we say, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm too busy, I got my own things going on. If we see a need and we're unwilling to respond, that's when we really walk away from what God would have us be. We don't hear about Jesus seeing people in need and turning and walking away. When Jairus came up to him and said, my daughter is dead, Jesus didn't look at him and say, hey, I can help you prepare a funeral. He didn't say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He said, oh, okay, I'll go with you. Let's see what we can do. And we know that after Jesus healed the lady who had need of healing on the way to Jairus' house, he went and he rose his daughter, Jairus' daughter, from the dead. He resurrected her and brought her back to life so she could continue to be with her parents and continue to bless that family. Jesus was willing to respond. He was always willing to provide that outreach. Time after time in the Bible, we read about that. And what we have to do is figure out how we apply that to our lives. There are so many people in the church who provide those sort of examples. I provided one today because it was fresh in my mind because it just happened. But if you talk to people in the church, there are examples of that all over the place about people who do things both behind the scenes and in front of the pulpit that we see or we don't see. They're all opportunities that were taken. What I would pray for this church is that as we continue to think, grow, and we continue to develop our Christian faith, not necessarily growing in numbers, but growing in fire and energy and discipleship and love, that we would find those ways to reach outside of the church, find those opportunities that God is giving to us, and most importantly, to act on them.